Go ahead. Today we're starting the Eternal Companion reading on page 177 in my edition. It's the section called Teachings of Maharaj. Now this is actual answers to questions that spiritual questions that people asked. So the first question, Maharaj, how did Sri Ramakrishna look upon mankind? Please tell us something about him. Sri Ramakrishna saw God in all beings. Seeing his great love for his disciples, Swami Vivekananda once said to him, "You love us all so much. Is it not possible that because of this love, you too may meet the same fate that Jada Bharat met?" And the footnote on that is referring to the story of Bhagavatam, which tells of the king who loved his pet deer so intensely that after his death, he himself was reborn as a deer. The moral of the story is, as you think, so you become. Therefore, one should not become attached to any object in the world. The master replied, "True, by thinking of matter, one becomes like matter. But you must understand that it is the God within you that I love. If my mind should ever become attached to any one of you as man or woman, I would at once dismiss all thought of you from my mind." Because Sri Ramakrishna taught the ideal of renunciation to his young disciples, he was often criticized by the worldly minded, and to such criticism he would answer, "I have no objection to anyone living in the world. Neither do I teach that every man and woman should renounce lust and greed. I teach renunciation only to those in whom there is already some spiritual awakening. I want these young men to attain first knowledge and discrimination, and then, if they wish, they may enter into worldly life." Indeed, to many who came to him, he would say, "First go out into the world, gather your experiences, and then, when you have become sick of the world, come to me for the cure." His teachings varied to suit all temperaments. When Swami Turiyananda was quite a young lad, he asked Sri Ramakrishna how he could give up thoughts of lust. The master said, "Give up lust? Why should you give up lust? Instead of trying to give up, you should increase your lust." This advice amazed the young disciple, but he said nothing, and the master continued, "Direct all your thoughts of lust and all your passions toward God." Often he would point to himself and say, "Everything will be achieved if you will love this." The more intensely you yearn for God, the greater will be your revelation of him. Sri Ramakrishna was many-sided. Whenever he talked about the intuitive knowledge of the Godhead, he would talk as one who was a pure jnani, a knower of Brahma, of God. And whenever he talked about love and devotion, he talked as a pure lover and devotee of God. He impressed upon us very clearly that mere secular knowledge is nothing but vanity, and that one should struggle hard to attain spiritual knowledge and love and devotion to God alone. Please tell us something about the Master's samadhi. The Master used to experience many different kinds of samadhi. In some states, his body would become stiff and motionless like a log. It was easy for him to regain his normal consciousness in such a state. But at other times, when the samadhi was deeper, it would take him much longer to return to normal consciousness. At such times, he would first draw a deep breath, like a drowning man coming out of deep water. Then for a while he would reel and act like a drunken man. Even his speech would be thick and incoherent. Gradually, however, he would regain his natural state. Whenever you teach and give lectures, quote the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. His words throw a clearer light on the scriptures and help to bring home the true import of their meaning. Insincerity was the one thing Sri Ramakrishna could not stand. He loved those who loved God sincerely, and he used to say, if a man prays to God with a sincere heart, he is quickly freed from all impurities. Most of the Master's nights were spent in samadhi, or chanting the Lord's name, or in singing his praise. He seldom slept for more than an hour any night. Often I have seen him completely absorbed in samadhi for more than an hour at a time. Sometimes he would try to speak to us, but no words would come. Later he would say, you see, I want to talk to you while I'm in samadhi, but whenever I try to do so, it seems as if the doors of my speech are locked. Many times as he was coming down to the normal plane, he would be muttering, as though addressing his words to God, whom he was still seeing. He used to say, to find God, you must yearn for him, and he would tell this story. An aspirant approached his teacher and asked to be shown the way to the attainment of God. The teacher took the disciple by the hand and led him to the river. There, without a word, he held the disciple's head under the water for some time. After a while, he let go, and the disciple came up choking and gasping for breath. He looked at his teacher in astonishment, and the teacher smiled at him and said, well, how did it feel? The disciple answered, I felt an intense longing for air. Well, said the teacher, when you can long for God with the same intensity as you longed for that breath of air, you will surely attain him. When Swami Vivekananda first came to Sri Ramakrishna as a young man, he would often argue with him. At that time, Swamiji believed only in the formless aspect of God, and even told Sri Ramakrishna that he considered his visions of God as mere hallucinations of the brain. He would also scold the devotees when they bowed down to the deities in the temple. This attitude annoyed many of the Master's disciples, but the Master himself was not disturbed. He could never be angry with Narayan. He would say, Narayan is unique. There is none to equal him. Later on, he gave Swamiji the vision of God in all his aspects, so that he too came to say, devote yourself to God, whether with form or without form, and you will reach him. Any questions or comments so far? Okay. Maharaj, many people are of the opinion that those who met Sri Ramakrishna did not need to struggle to find God. To know him was quite sufficient. Even the great devotee Ram Datta held this view. Ram Datta was unique. He had true faith, a faith which grew in intensity and which lasted all his life. Few have such faith. With the majority, it is merely lip faith. Maharaj, many devotees who have seen the Holy Mother and have served holy men think it is not necessary for them to continue their spiritual struggles. Merely to see Holy Mother and to serve holy men is not enough. It is most necessary to practice renunciation and discrimination and to live a contemplative life. The one purpose of human life is to attain devotion to God and spiritual illumination. Otherwise, life is vain and meaningless. Eating, drinking, sleeping, and procreating are not the sole ends of human birth. These belong to the brutes. God is greatly manifest in the human body. Try to understand this truth. Excuse me. Swamiji gave his heart's blood to build this monastery so that you young men might have the opportunity to devote your lives to God and practice spiritual disciplines. In fact, in his effort to make your life easier, he overexerted himself and shortened his own life. What intense love he had toward all mankind. Sri Ramakrishna was revealed to the world at large through Swamiji. Know that their words and teachings are not different. Sri Ramakrishna was too great for the average mind to grasp. It was Swami Vivekananda who made his life and teachings understandable to all. Study Swamiji's works carefully, for unless you understand his teachings, it is useless to try to understand Sri Ramakrishna. Read and study the teachings of both, and at the same time devote yourself to the practice of japa and meditation. You are young now, and these are the best years of your life. Mold your minds now. When once the mind is molded, there is nothing to fear. When you can bring the mind under control, you will have achieved much. Whip it whenever it tries to run away. Hold fast to the lotus feet of the Lord. Remember him constantly. Do not waste any more time in worldly thoughts. Struggle. Struggle hard to control the outgoing mind and fix it on God. When you can do this, you will realize what joy there is in spiritual life. What fun. And there's a footnote here. The word fun as applied to spiritual joy was characteristic of Swami Brahmananda, who wished by its use to do away with the chasm which exists in many minds between the high satisfactions of religion and the moods of simple happiness experienced in everyday life. Everyone likes fun. Why then should everyone not like God? For God, when all is said, is the real and only fun. Ignorance must be overcome in this very life. This will not be easy unless you can devote yourself wholeheartedly to the work of the Spirit. Faith is the one thing needed, intense faith. Let no doubts get hold of your mind. Question: but if doubts come, Maharaj, doubts will come until you have realized God. Therefore, you must hold fast to God and pray. Think to yourself, God is, but because of the impurities of my mind, I cannot see him. When my heart and mind have become purified, then, through his grace, I shall surely see him. God cannot be known by the finite mind. He is beyond the mind and far beyond the intellect. This apparent universe is a creation of the mind. The mind has conjured it up. It is its author, and the mind cannot go beyond its own domain. Behind this mind of ours, there is a subtle, spiritual mind existing in seed form. Through the practice of contemplation, prayer, and japa, this mind is developed. And with this development, a new vision opens, and the aspirant realizes many spiritual truths. This, however, is not the final experience. The subtle mind leads the aspirant nearer to God, but it cannot reach God, the Supreme Atman. Having reached this stage, the world no longer holds any charm for the aspirant. He becomes absorbed in the consciousness of God. This absorption leads to samadhi, an experience which cannot be described. It is beyond is and is not. There is neither happiness nor misery, neither light nor darkness. All is infinite being, inexpressible. Maharaj, how should we perform our worldly duties? Do your duties conscientiously and without attachment. Always remember that you are instruments in the hands of God, and that God Himself is the only doer. Keep your mind fixed in God. It is not always easy to keep the mind steady in God while working. The ego creeps in. But never be discouraged by your failures. Repeated failure is inevitable in the beginning, but keep your faith and redouble your efforts. Try hard to live up to your ideal. Let your watchword be, I must realize God in this very life. After all, what is the use of this body and this mind if they do not help you to realize God? Do or die. What does it matter even if you die in the attempt? Maharaj, what is the significance of all these gods and goddesses? Do they really exist? And what is the meaning and purpose of ritualistic worship? The many gods and goddesses represent but so many different aspects of the one Godhead. Men differ in their temperaments, and so are inclined to different ways of worship. To meet the needs of all, the scriptures prescribe 4 distinct methods of worship. One method is the ritualistic worship of God embodied in an image or symbol. Higher than this is the worship of God with prayer and jopam. By this means, the aspirant prays and chants and meditates upon the shining form of his chosen ideal within his own heart. Higher still is meditation. When a man practices this form of worship, he keeps up a constant flow of thought toward God and becomes absorbed in the living presence of his chosen ideal. He goes beyond prayer and jopam, but the sense of duality remains. The highest method of worship is meditation on the unity of the Atman and Brahman. This leads directly and immediately to God. The aspirant experiences Brahman. He knows that God is. It is an actual realization of the omnipresent reality. These are the different stages through which the aspirant progresses. It is of vital importance that a man begin his spiritual journey from where he is. If an average man is instructed to meditate on his union with the absolute Brahman, he will not understand. He will neither grasp the truth of it, nor be able to follow the instructions. For a while he may try, but sooner or later he will tire of the struggle and give up. However, if that same man is asked to worship God with flowers, incense, and other accessories of ritualistic worship, his mind will gradually become concentrated on God, and he will find joy in the worship. Through such worship, devotion to the performance of japa grows. The finer the mind becomes, the greater is its capacity for the higher forms of worship. The mind inclines towards meditation. Thus, the aspirant gradually and naturally moves towards his ideal. Take the illustration of a man standing in the courtyard of a house. He wants to reach the roof, but instead of climbing the staircase step by step, he permits himself to be thrown up bodily. What happens? He is seriously hurt. So it is with spiritual life. We should follow the gradual path, for just as there are laws governing the physical world, there are laws governing the spiritual world. Any questions or comments on any of this yet? Okay. Next question. This is a good one. How may I check a distracting thought that persistently arises in my mind? I think we've all had that experience. Think to yourself, this thought is immensely harmful to me. It will be my ruin. Impress the idea again and again upon your mind. The mind is extremely susceptible to suggestions and will learn whatever you teach it. Therefore, if through discrimination you can impress upon it the joy and fullness of the spiritual life and the folly of worldly attachments, it will devote itself more and more to God, and you will find yourself freed from all distracting thoughts. The supreme ideal of the human life is to know God. Everyone must have this ideal firmly established in his life, and the ideal must never be lowered. He who is smaller than the smallest, greater than the greatest, shines forth always and everywhere. He dwells within all beings, great and small. He dwells in the plants and the herbs. He dwells everywhere in greater or lesser manifestation. Make that one supreme, all-pervading spirit your ideal. Even after a little effort to realize him, you will see what fun it is. You will find in him an inexhaustible fountain of joy. You have seen enough of one side of life. Now see the other side, the real side. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. A veil is hiding the reality. Remove that veil, and you will find him. If you apply yourself to the attainment of this ideal, the whole world will be transformed for you. Next question, Maharaj, what rules of diet should one follow? That's a difficult question to answer. Men differ so widely in their constitutions that it is hardly possible to lay down any hard and fast rule about food. One kind of food may be agreeable to your constitution and yet may do me harm. For this reason, the scriptures do not specifically advise any diet, but only warn against rich foods. Should we avoid eating meat since it entails killing? Nonsense. The Buddhists say harmlessness is the greatest virtue. What does this mean? You can understand the significance of this only when you have attained samadhi, when you have reached enlightenment and have seen God in all creatures. Until then, talk is useless. When you can see the same God in the ant as in yourself, then you can practice this virtue. You may not talk of not killing. You may talk of not killing, but can you possibly avoid killing? What would you eat? Potatoes? Plant a potato underground, it shoots forth young sprouts. Has the potato no life? Would you eat rice? Plant the paddy grain in the earth, it grows to a rice plant. You want to drink water? Examine a drop of water under a microscope and see how many millions of tiny lives are there. You must breathe to live, yet with every breath you kill millions of creatures. Do you see any harm in that? You think you lose your religion if you take a little fish? Such arguments are foolish. The ancient Hindus held no such beliefs. These are later Buddhist and Vaishnavite interpolations. Samadhi is generally classified as two kinds. That was the answer to that question. Now we're going into a general interpretation of samadhi. Samadhi is generally classified as of two kinds. In the first, the Savikapa Samadhi, one experiences the mystic vision of the spiritual form of God, while consciousness of individuality remains. In the second, the Nirvikalpa Samadhi, a man loses his individuality and goes beyond the vision of the form of God. The whole universe disappears. Besides these two, there is yet another kind of samadhi called ananda samadhi, blissful. If an ordinary man attains this experience, his body and mind cannot stand the intense ecstatic joy. He cannot live more than 21 days. Between the eyebrows there is a third eye, the eye of wisdom. When this eye is opened, a fountain of joy is released, and the whole universe seems merged in bliss. One day in the course of his teaching, Sri Ramakrishna spoke about the manifestation of Brahman as sound, the logos. Later, when I sat for meditation, I took this as my subject, and it was not long before the sound of Brahman was revealed to me. Sri Ramakrishna told me one day, once while I was meditating in the temple, screen after screen of Maya was removed from my consciousness, and I saw a light more brilliant than 1,000,000 suns. From that light there came forth a spiritual form, which again melted away into the formless. The body is the temple of God, and one should practice worship and meditation within it. When the consciousness merges into the Sahasra, the mind does not feel inclined to come back. There you realize that what is outside is also inside yourself. Though temples may serve as aids to the beginner, they are but symbols of God's greatest of all temples, the human heart. I think we'll stop there for this evening. And if anyone has any comments or questions, we're getting a very condensed and clear reiteration of Ramakrishna's teachings. But if anyone has any comments, we're willing to listen to them now, or answer any questions if we can. Sunanda?
Samadhi, where you have the mystic vision, but you have the consciousness of individuality at the same time.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. It's the one where I would say where you still maintain your relationship with God, the one you have cultivated.
Okay.
Because you see God and you know you're seeing God. Yeah. I hadn't.
That's not as scary as the other ones.
It kind of sounds like fun to me. I think I would like that one. Now, next week, Wednesday, Swami Brahmananda from Toronto will be visiting us. He will be giving the class here in the temple. I'm not sure what he will give the class. I just give a spiritual talk. I haven't talked to him yet. We haven't seen him, but he will be here at 5 o'clock. So I hope you all can join us then. As I say, it'll be a spiritual talk or something. He's a darling. We will have Saturday, we'll have our regular reading of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And Sunday, Swami Sarvadevananda will be here speaking on Sangha, Buddha to Vedanta. That'll be here in the temple also, live and on Zoom. Yeah.
Doing the Saturday.
I'm sorry?
Is Swami Sarvadevananda also doing the Saturday class or just the Sunday lecture?
He'll probably do the Saturday class. I haven't talked to him. We have a board meeting tonight, Amrita, and we'll be talking about that. He hasn't told me.
Okay, you'll
But
let us know.
prepare yourself for him to give the Saturday class also. Okay.
All right, that would be good. Great.
Yeah. All right, if there's no more comments or questions about anything, as everyone knows, bookstores Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The temple's open all day Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 6:30 in the morning till 7 in the evening. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the temple is open from 5 to 7. So we're slowly opening up. And we'll end with a chant. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.